I'm Clara Vance, 28, female, and my father just told me that the family business I've poured my heart into will never be mine because I'm not his son. He didn't scream it. He didn't even raise his voice. He said it with the calm, unshakable certainty of a man stating the color of the sky, and that's what broke me. It was a fact to him, as fundamental as wood grain or the pull of gravity. My entire life, my dedication, my talent, it was all secondary to the simple, unchangeable fact of my gender. The company is called Vance & Sons Custom Cabinetry. The name itself should have been my first clue. It was etched into the frosted glass of the main office door, stitched onto the breast of our work shirts, and printed on the side of every delivery truck. Vance & Sons, not Vance & Co., not Vance & Family. Sons, plural. Even though my father, Arthur Vance, only had one son, my older brother, Marcus. I was the second child, the daughter, the one who was never destined to be part of that and sons equation. I suppose the signs were always there, scattered like wood shavings on the workshop floor, but I had chosen to ignore them. I believed, with the earnest naivete of a devoted daughter, that my work would eventually speak for itself, that my skill would carve out a place for me that tradition couldn't deny. I started in the workshop when I was 14, sweeping floors and sorting hardware. I fell in love not with the idea of a business, but with the craft itself. I loved the scent of freshly cut oak, the precision of a dovetail joint, the magical transformation of a raw slab of wood into something beautiful and functional. My father was a master craftsman in his youth, and in those early days, he seemed proud. He showed me how to read the grain, how to handle a chisel without splitting the wood, how to feel the readiness of a finished surface with the palm of my hand. "You've got the touch, Clara," he'd say, a rare smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. A natural feel for it. Marcus, who was 4 years older, had no such touch. He hated the dust and the noise of the workshop. He was clumsy with the tools and impatient with the process. His talents, as my father called them, were for people. He was charming, handsome, and could talk his way out of anything. While I was learning the intricate details of joinery, Marcus was learning how to play golf with potential clients. While I was mastering the design software that would eventually revolutionize our workflow, Marcus was mastering the art of the business lunch. We were on two different paths, yet I was convinced they both led to the same destination, the future of Vance & Sons. I thought we were a team. I was the operations, he was the sales. The perfect partnership. The first time the cold reality of my position truly hit me was about 5 years ago. We had landed a major contract for a downtown law firm, our biggest project to date. Marcus had been the one to schmooze the senior partners, so in my father's eyes, it was Marcus's win. The problem was that Marcus, in his eagerness to close the deal, had promised a specific type of rare, imported ebony wood without checking our supplier's stock. Worse, he'd gotten the measurements for the main partner's custom credenza completely wrong. He had measured the wall space, but failed to account for a large electrical outlet and data port panel that couldn't be moved. I discovered the errors 2 weeks before the deadline. The wood was unavailable, and the credenza, as designed, was impossible to install. Panic set in, but not for Marcus. He just shrugged. "We'll tell them there's a delay," he said, already dialing the number for the golf course to book a tee time. "Blame the supplier. Happens all the time." But I knew that wasn't good enough. This client could make or break our reputation, so I spent the next 48 hours in a state of controlled frenzy. I called every supplier on the continent until I found a small, family-owned mill in Oregon that had a similar, even more beautiful species of wood. I paid for the rush shipping out of my own pocket. Then, I sat down with the blueprints. I redesigned the entire back panel of the credenza, creating an ingenious, seamless access panel that incorporated the outlet box into the design itself. It was more complex, requiring a level of craftsmanship that pushed our workshop to its limit, but it was perfect. I worked alongside our senior carpenter, Lewis, through 2 nights, personally making the cuts and fitting the new panel. We delivered the project on time. The client was ecstatic, especially with the custom credenza, calling it a work of art. At the next company meeting, my father stood up and raised a glass. "To Marcus," he announced, beaming, "for his tenacity in landing the Henderson account and seeing it through. This is the kind of leadership that will take Vance and Sons to the next level." Marcus nodded, accepting the praise as if he'd earned it. I sat there, why hands still sore from the work, feeling a profound sense of invisibility. When I tried to gently mention the design change to my father later, he just waved his hand dismissively. "That's what you do, Clara. You manage the operations. Marcus brings in the money. It's a team effort." But it wasn't a team. On a team, every player's contribution is valued. Here, my contributions were simply expected, while Marcus's were celebrated. The second signpost on this road to disillusionment was the Regional Design Awards a few years later. On a whim, I entered a design for a modular kitchen island with a unique, self-closing drawer system I had developed in my spare time. I didn't tell anyone, I just submitted the plans. I won. Not just in my category, but I received the Innovator of the Year award. My name was in a trade magazine. Our company name was mentioned. It was a huge honor. When the magazine article came out, my father bought a dozen copies and left them in the reception area. He even framed the award and hung it in the main conference room. But the plaque didn't say Clara Vance. He'd had it engraved to read, "Vance and Sons Custom Cabinetry." That evening, we had a family dinner to celebrate. My mother, a gentle soul who had long ago learned to navigate the currents of my father's personality, was genuinely proud. She hugged me tightly and told me she always knew my talent was special. But my father's toast was telling. "To the future," he said, raising his glass. "Marcus just secured a corporate membership at the Oak Valley Golf Club. It's a vital investment in our future client relationships. And, of course, congratulations to the workshop team for that design award. A nice little feather in our cap." A nice little feather. My innovation, my late nights, my creation, a feather. Marcus's golf games, a vital investment. The message was clear. His work, which was about building relationships with powerful men, was serious business. My work, which was about the very essence of our company, was a hobby. The final, undeniable confirmation came just last month. It was my father's 62nd birthday. The whole extended family was there. After dinner, he stood up to give a speech. He talked about his life, about building the business from a one-man shop into what it was today. And then he looked toward the future. "I'm not getting any younger," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And it's time to think about legacy, about what comes next." He raised his glass and looked directly at my brother. "I look at my son, Marcus, and I see the future of this company. He has the vision, the charisma, the name, to Vance and Sons, and to the son who will one day lead it." The entire room erupted in applause. Aunts and uncles and cousins all turned to Marcus, patting him on the back. He stood there, soaking it all in, a king accepting his coronation. My father didn't even glance at me. It was as if I wasn't even in the room. I felt the air leave my lungs, the warmth drain from my body. I was a ghost at my own family gathering. It was then that I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my belief in meritocracy had been a fool's dream. I hadn't just been overlooked, I had been erased. And I knew I had to ask him directly, to hear the words from his mouth, just so the last sliver of hope could finally be extinguished. A week after that disastrous birthday dinner, I decided I couldn't live with the ghosts of unspoken words any longer. I needed to hear it from him. I needed the finality, the brutal honesty that would sever the last thread of hope I was foolishly clinging to. I found my father in his office, the one room in the entire company building that had always felt foreign to me. It smelled of leather and old paper, not sawdust and wood stain. It was a place for making deals, not for making things. He was looking over a set of financial reports, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up as I entered, a hint of surprise in his eyes. I rarely came into his office. Our conversations usually happened on the workshop floor, amidst the scream of saws and the hum of sanders. "Clara," he said, taking off his glasses, "everything all right?" "I need to talk to you, Dad," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I closed the heavy oak door behind me, the soft click echoing in the quiet room. The sound felt symbolic, like I was shutting myself in with my own fate. I sat in one of the plush leather chairs opposite his imposing desk. The chair was uncomfortable, designed for visitors and clients, not for family. It was a prop in the theater of his authority. "I was at your birthday dinner," I began, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I heard your speech, your toast." He leaned back in his chair, a placid expression on his face. "It was a wonderful night. It's good to have the whole family together." "You talked about the future of the company," I continued, pushing past his attempt to deflect. "You toasted Marcus as the next leader. You said he was the future." "And he is," Arthur said simply, his tone leaving no room for debate. "He's the sales director, he has the relationships. He's my firstborn son. It's the natural order of things." There it was, not the whole truth, but the cornerstone of it. The natural order. As if we were living in a medieval kingdom where birthright was the only currency that mattered. "And what about me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Where do I fit into this natural order?" He sighed, a long, weary sound, as if I were a difficult child asking an inconvenient question. "Clara, you are the best operations manager a company could ask for. You're brilliant with the details, with the designs, with the workshop. You're an incredible asset. The company wouldn't be what it is today without you." His words were meant to be a compliment, a placating pat on the head, but they felt like poison, an asset, like a piece of machinery or a valuable patent. I was a thing to be used, not a person to be considered. "I don't want to be an asset, Dad," I said, a wave of cold anger rising in my chest. "I want to be a partner. I want to be a successor. I know this business inside and out. I know the craft, the clients, the finances, the employees. Marcus knows how to play golf." The jab at Marcus made his eyes narrow. "That's unfair, and you know it. Marcus builds the relationships that keep your workshop busy. Don't diminish his role just because you don't understand it." "I understand it perfectly," I retorted. "I also understand that I'm the one who fixes the mistakes that come from those relationships. I'm the one who delivers on the impossible promises. I'm the one who has won awards for this company. I have given everything to this place." I finally stood up, unable to sit still any longer. I paced in front of his desk, the carefully constructed dam of my composure beginning to crack. "Why, Dad? Just tell me the real reason why. Is it just because he's older?" Arthur took a deep breath and looked at me, and for the first time, his expression was not one of dismissal, but of something that looked almost like pity. It was worse than anger. "Clara, sit down," he said softly. I ignored him. "Tell me." He stood up as well, his presence seeming to fill the entire room. "All right, you want the real reason? The business is called Vance & Sons. It needs a man at the helm. It needs a Vance son. Clients, suppliers, competitors. They expect to deal with a man. It's a tough world, and that's the reality of it. Marcus has the name. He has the presence. He can command a room full of men in a way that, well, in a way that he can." The unspoken words hung in the air between us, in a way that you can't. Every ounce of strength I had went into not breaking down right there. The years of hard work, the nights spent perfecting designs, the splinters in my hands, the passion for the wood itself, all of it was irrelevant. My skill, my dedication, my proven success, none of it mattered. It was all erased by a single, simple, biological fact. I wasn't a son. "So that's it," I said, the words feeling like dust in my mouth. "After all these years, after everything I've done, it comes down to that. You think I'm less capable because I'm a woman." "I didn't say less capable," he said, his voice taking on a defensive edge. "I said you were a phenomenal operations manager. It's a different skill set. Leadership is different. It's about presence, about authority. Marcus is the face of the company. You're the engine. We need both." The engine, hidden away, doing the hard work while the shiny exterior gets all the credit. I finally understood. He wasn't just choosing Marcus over me, he was defining my place, my ceiling, my limits. and that ceiling was to be my brother's second in command forever. He must have seen the finality in my eyes, the extinguishing of that last spark. He softened his tone, trying to salvage the situation, to manage his asset. "I'm not leaving you with nothing, Clara. I'm prepared to offer you a very generous severance package if you decide you want to go elsewhere. Or you can stay on. Your position as operations manager is secure, of course. You'll have a job for life here under Marcus. He'll need your expertise." The offer was the final insult. He wanted me to stay. He wanted me to swallow my pride, my ambition, my very identity, and work for my less qualified brother, to be the silent, competent woman behind the charming, inadequate man. He wanted me to be the engine for his chosen son. I looked at him, at the man who had taught me how to hold a chisel, the man whose approval I had craved for 2 decades. And I felt nothing. The anger, the pain, it all receded, replaced by a strange, hollow calm. The fight was over because it had never really been a fight at all. The outcome was decided the day I was born. "I need to think," I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I turned and walked toward the door, not waiting for a response. "Clara," he called after me, a hint of desperation in his voice now. "Don't be rash, this is your family." I paused with my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. "No, Dad," I said, looking at the name etched on the glass. "This is Vance and Sons. I was never really a part of it." I walked out of his office, through the reception area, and past the conference room where my award, the company's award, hung on the wall. I didn't stop until I was outside in the cool afternoon air, and only then did I allow myself to feel the full, crushing weight of the betrayal. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room of my small apartment, the city lights twinkling outside my window, and I let the reality of the situation wash over me in waves. Each wave brought a different memory to the surface. My father praising my first wobbly bookshelf, the smell of the varnish I had so carefully applied, the pride I felt seeing our company's logo on a finished project. These memories, once warm and comforting, now felt sharp and painful, like shards of glass from a shattered picture frame. For years, I had organized my entire life around the business. My friendships, my schedule, my ambitions, everything was interwoven with Vance and Sons. The company wasn't just my job, it was my identity. And my father had just told me that identity was a costume, a role I was playing until the rightful heir was ready to take the stage. Around 3 a.m., surrounded by the ghosts of my own hopes, I made my decision. It wasn't a dramatic, tear-filled moment. It was quiet and cold and absolute. I could not stay. Staying wouldn't just be an acceptance of a lesser role, it would be an admission that my father was right. It would be agreeing that my worth was defined by my gender and my birth order. It would be a betrayal of myself, and that was one betrayal I could not endure. I walked over to my desk, powered on my laptop, and began to type. My resignation letter was the most difficult and the easiest thing I had ever written. I poured all the professionalism I had into it, making it as clean and precise as one of my designs. "Dear Mr. Vance." I chose the formal salutation deliberately. He had made this a business decision, so I would treat it as such. "Please accept this letter as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as operations manager at Vance and Sons Custom Cabinetry. My final day of employment will be in 2 weeks, on date. I am grateful for the opportunity to have worked here for the past 10 years. I have learned a great deal, and I am proud of the contributions I have made to the company's success. I will do everything necessary to ensure a smooth transition during my final 2 weeks. I am committed to completing my current projects and documenting my responsibilities to assist in the training of my replacement. Sincerely, Clara Vance." No emotion, no accusations, no mention of the heartbreaking conversation in his office, just cold, hard facts. My resignation was not a plea for him to change his mind. It was a statement of my own worth. I printed the letter, signed it with a steady hand, and slid it into a plain white envelope. The next morning, I walked into the office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I bypassed the workshop and went straight to my father's office. He was on the phone, and he motioned for me to wait. I saw Marcus walking down the hall, a smug, confident grin on his face. He'd probably been briefed on my new, permanent place in the company hierarchy. "Clara, just the woman I wanted to see," Marcus said, leaning against the doorframe of my father's office. "Dad and I were just mapping out the next 5 years. Big things on the horizon. We're going to need you to really tighten up the production schedules." I gave him a thin, polite smile. "That sounds like a conversation for you and my replacement," I said. My father ended his call, his eyes flicking between me and Marcus. "Clara, what's this?" I stepped forward and placed the white envelope on the center of his large desk. "My resignation," I said clearly. The silence that followed was heavy and absolute. Arthur stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Marcus's smug grin evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief. "You can't be serious," Marcus stammered. "You're quitting, why?" "It's a personal decision," I said, my gaze fixed on my father. Arthur finally picked up the envelope, his movements slow and deliberate. He slid it open with a letter opener and read the contents. His face, which had been set in stern, authoritative lines, seemed to crumble slightly. He looked not angry, but genuinely shocked, as if this possibility had never once crossed his mind. "After everything this family, this company has given you," he said, his voice a low growl, "you'd throw it all away." "You didn't, Chip." "It to me, Dad," I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "I earned my place here, and you are the one who told me that place has a ceiling. I've just decided I'm not willing to live under it." "This is about Marcus, isn't it?" he accused. "You're just jealous." "No," I said, shaking my head. "This isn't about Marcus. This is about me. This is about my future, and I see now that I have to build it for myself." I turned to leave. "I'll be at my desk," I said. "I have a lot of work to do to prepare for the transition." The next 2 weeks were the most professionally challenging and emotionally draining of my life. I worked with a singular focus, creating detailed manuals for every process I managed, from client intake and design to material ordering and final quality control. I documented everything, not for Arthur or Marcus, but for Louis and the rest of the workshop team who depended on a smooth operation. It was a matter of professional pride. The atmosphere in the office was thick with resentment. Marcus alternated between ignoring me completely and making snide comments about my disloyalty. My father barely spoke to me, his disappointment a palpable force whenever I entered a room. He saw my meticulous transition plan not as a professional courtesy, but as the final, cold act of a traitor. The only warmth came from the workshop floor. Louis, our head carpenter, a man with hands like gnarled oak and a heart of pure gold, pulled me aside on my second-to-last day. "We are going to miss you, Clarita," he said, his voice heavy. "You are the heart of this place. You understand the wood. He nodded toward the offices, they only understand the money." His words were a balm on my wounded spirit. The craftsmen, the people who truly knew the soul of the business, they saw me. They understood my value. It was a small comfort, but it was enough. On my last day, I packed my personal belongings into a small cardboard box. A few books, a framed photo of me and my mom, a beautiful hand-carved miniature chair Louis had made me years ago. I did a final walkthrough of the workshop, saying goodbye to the team. When I was done, I walked to the front office. Arthur and Marcus were standing there, waiting. I placed my keys and my security badge on the reception desk. "Everything is documented," I said. "My replacement should have everything they need." Marcus snorted. "Don't worry, we'll manage just fine without you." I looked at my father, hoping for one last word, a flicker of understanding, of regret. But his face was a mask of cold disappointment. "Good luck, Clara," was all he said. I nodded, turned, and walked out the door with the frosted glass that read Vance & Sons. As the door clicked shut behind me, I didn't feel sadness or anger. I felt a profound and terrifying sense of emptiness. I was no longer Clara Vance, operations manager. I was just Clara. And for the first time in my adult life, I had no idea what came next. The first week of my new life was a study in silence. The familiar 6 a.m. alarm, usually the starting pistol for a frantic day of managing deadlines and solving problems, was quiet. The constant buzz of my phone, with calls from suppliers, clients, and workshop staff, ceased. The silence was deafening. It was the sound of a life that had been completely dismantled. I spent those first few days adrift in my own apartment, feeling like a ghost. I'd wake up, and for a split second, my mind would already be at the workshop, planning the day's production schedule. Then reality would crash down, and I'd be left staring at the ceiling, the emptiness of the day stretching out before me like a barren desert. My identity had been so completely tied to my role at Vance & Sons that without it, I felt like a stranger to myself. But after a week of aimless wandering and feeling sorry for myself, a different feeling began to surface, a tiny, flickering ember of defiance. I thought of my father's words, his casual dismissal of my capabilities. I thought of Marcus's smug certainty. A quiet anger began to burn away the fog of self-pity. They thought I was just an engine, a supporting part. They thought I couldn't function without them. I was going to prove them wrong. The first step was to reclaim my craft. I took a significant portion of my savings, money I had diligently put away for a future that now looked completely different, and started searching for a workspace. I couldn't afford anything grand. What I found was a small, dusty garage unit in an industrial park on the other side of town. It had concrete floors, a single grimy window, and a roll-up door that groaned in protest every time it was opened. It was a world away from the state-of-the-art facility at Vance & Sons, but when I stood in the middle of that empty space, all I could see was potential. It was a blank canvas. It was mine. I spent the next month bringing it to life. I scrubbed the floors, painted the walls a clean, bright white, and installed new lighting. I used my knowledge of workshop flow to design an efficient layout, even in the cramped space. Then came the most painful part, buying tools. I had to sell the sensible, reliable car I loved to afford the basic equipment: a good table saw, a planer, a jointer, and a collection of high-quality hand tools. Each purchase was a gamble, a bet on myself. I called my new venture Clara Vance Designs, not Clara Vance and Daughter or Clara's Cabinetry. Just my name, my work, it was a declaration. The initial jobs were small, the kind of work Vance & Sons wouldn't even bother quoting. A custom bookshelf for a neighbor, a set of floating shelves for a local coffee shop, a bespoke vanity for a friend's bathroom renovation. I was the entire company: the designer, the builder, the finisher, the accountant, and the delivery driver. I worked from dawn until long past dusk. My hands, which had softened during my years in a management role, quickly became calloused and stained again. My back ached. I was perpetually covered in a fine layer of sawdust. There were days of overwhelming frustration, like when a complex cut went wrong, wasting a precious piece of expensive walnut, or when a potential client scoffed at my price, expecting handmade quality for a factory direct price. During those moments of doubt, the temptation to feel regret was immense. I could have been in my climate-controlled office, earning a steady, generous salary, with a team of people to handle the hard labor. I could have swallowed my pride and accepted the comfortable cage my father had offered me. But then I would complete a piece. I'd run my hand over the perfectly smooth, hand-rubbed oil finish of a tabletop. I'd see the look of delight on a client's face when they saw their idea brought to life, exactly as they had imagined it. In those moments, I felt a sense of ownership and pride that I had never truly experienced at Vance & Sons. Every success, no matter how small, was entirely my own. I wasn't an engine hidden away in the dark. I was the whole machine, and I was finally in the driver's seat. I was slowly, painstakingly building something from nothing. It wasn't just a business, it was a testament. A quiet answer to the dismissal I had faced. I didn't know if it would ever be as big or as profitable as my father's company, and at that point I didn't care. It was real, it was honest, and it was mine. And for the first time since walking out of that office, I felt a flicker of something that felt a lot like freedom. Several months passed. Clara Vance Designs had found a small, steady rhythm. I had a backlog of small to medium projects that kept me busy and paid the bills. I'd even hired a part-time assistant, a young woman from a local trade school who was eager to learn. My little garage workshop was no longer a symbol of what I had lost, but a bustling hub of my new reality. I had stopped thinking about Vance and Sons every day. The wound was still there, but it had scabbed over into a faint scar, a reminder of a past life. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was carefully measuring a cut on a piece of cherry wood, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a prominent downtown area code. Probably a sales call, I thought, and almost ignored it, but something made me answer. I wiped my dusty hands on my jeans and picked up. "Clara Vance Designs, this is Clara," I said, my standard professional greeting. "Clara, it's Richard Peterson, from Sterling Developments." The name sent a jolt through me. Mr. Peterson. He was the senior project manager for our biggest, most important client at Vance and Sons. Sterling Developments was a high-end property developer, and their contracts were the lifeblood that had fueled my father's company's growth for the last decade. Mr. Peterson was meticulous, demanding, but fair. He was also one of the few clients who always made a point of speaking directly with me, the operations manager, to discuss the technical and design specifics of a project. He valued competence over charisma, and we had developed a strong, mutually respectful working relationship over the years. "Mr. Peterson," I said, surprise evident in my voice, "it's so good to hear from you. How are you?" "I'm well, Clara, thank you. The question is, how are you? I have to be honest, I was shocked when I called Vance and Sons this morning and they told me you were no longer with the company." My heart began to beat a little faster. "Yes, I left a few months ago to start my own firm." "Well, that explains why my call was such a mess," he said with a dry chuckle. "I was trying to get some preliminary details sorted for our new Pinnacle Towers project, and let's just say your brother. He's a very good talker, but when it comes to the nuts and bolts, the conversation didn't inspire a great deal of confidence." I remained silent, not wanting to say anything negative about my family's business. I didn't. Have to. "Look, Clara," he continued, his tone shifting from friendly to all business. "Pinnacle Towers is the biggest project Sterling has ever undertaken. It's our flagship luxury residential development for the next 5 years. The standards are astronomical. The designs for the kitchens and master suite built-ins are incredibly complex. Frankly, you were the main reason I had absolute faith that Vance and Sons could deliver. Your name was on my project plan as the key person for the entire cabinetry contract." I felt a dizzying mix of validation and anxiety. "I appreciate you saying that, Mr. Peterson." "So, here's my question," he said, getting to the point. "What exactly is Clara Vance Designs? Are you just a one-woman consulting firm now, or are you actually building?" "I'm building," I said, a newfound confidence in my voice. "I have a workshop and I'm taking on custom projects." I decided against mentioning that my workshop was a converted garage and my firm was mostly just me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him tapping something, probably a pen, on his desk. "Interesting," he said. "Marcus gave me the impression you'd left the industry entirely. He was very vague." Of course he was. The last thing Marcus would want is for a major client to know that I was still in the game and available. "Clara, I need to be blunt," Mr. Peterson said. "My faith in Vance and Sons to handle a project of this scale and complexity without you at the helm is compromised. I'm not prepared to risk the success of Pinnacle Towers on a sales pitch. I need to know the work is going to be flawless. I was always impressed with your attention to detail and your innovative solutions. Remember that credenza for the Henderson law firm?" I smiled. "I remember it well." "Exactly," he said. "That's the kind of problem-solving this project needs. I'm coming back into town next week. I would like to meet with you. I want to see your new operation." My mind raced. My garage? He wanted to see my tiny, dusty garage? The man who was used to touring the massive, gleaming Vance and Sons facility. Panic began to bubble in my chest. This was a disaster. He would take one look at my small-scale setup and realize I was completely out of my league. But then I took a deep breath. What did I have to lose? My pride? I'd already had that torn down and rebuilt from scratch. I had to believe in the quality of my work, no matter the size of the workshop it came from. "I would like that very much, Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice betraying none of my inner turmoil. "Just let me know when, and I'll send you the address." We set a time for the following Tuesday. As I hung up the phone, I stared around my little workshop. It had been my sanctuary, my proof of concept. Now it felt hopelessly inadequate, but it was also honest. It was a true representation of my work, and for better or worse, Mr. Peterson was about to see it. The following Tuesday felt like the day of my final exam. I spent the entire morning cleaning the workshop until it was spotless. I laid out my best work-in-progress pieces, organized my tools, and displayed my portfolio of finished projects on a makeshift table. I was nervous, but I was also proud. This little space represented my resilience. Mr. Peterson arrived exactly on time. He was a tall, sharp man in his late 50s, dressed in a crisp suit that looked completely out of place in my industrial park. He took in the small space with a single, sweeping glance. I held my breath, waiting for the flicker of disappointment or polite condescension. It never came. Instead, he walked over to a half-finished media console I was building from reclaimed walnut. He ran his hand over a complex joint I had cut. He examined the finish, the precision of the lines, the quality of the wood. He didn't say a word for several minutes. "This is beautiful work, Clara," he said finally, turning to me. His expression was serious, impressed. "The quality here is equal to, if not better than, anything I saw coming out of your father's shop." I felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I believe in quality over quantity." "So do I," he said. He then spent the next hour with me, not looking at the size of my shop, but at the details of my work. He studied my designs, asked sharp, insightful questions about my process, and listened intently to my answers. He saw the craft, not the container it came in. Finally, he stood in the center of the room. "All right, Clara, I've seen enough. I'm going to be direct with you. The cabinetry contract for the Pinnacle Towers project is worth several $1,000,000 over the next 3 years. It's the largest contract Sterling Developments has ever issued for this kind of work." I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "I came here today hoping I might be able to hire you as a consultant to oversee the work at Vance and Sons," he Conti. "Nude, but having seen this, having talked to you, I've changed my mind. I don't want you to oversee them. I want you to have the contract." I stared at him, certain I had misheard. "Me, but, Mr. Peterson, you've seen my operation. I don't have the capacity, the manpower." "You don't," he agreed calmly. "Not yet, but you have something more important, the skill and the integrity. Capacity can be bought. Manpower can be hired. Integrity cannot. Sterling Developments is prepared to offer the entire Pinnacle Towers contract to Clara Vance Designs. Furthermore, we are prepared to front the capital you will need for expansion. A larger facility, new equipment, a full team. We are not just offering you a contract, Clara. We are investing in you." I was speechless. The air left my body in a rush. It was an impossible, life-altering offer. It was a vindication so complete and so far beyond anything I could have imagined that it felt like a dream. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "Say you'll think about it," he said with a small smile. "Draw up a preliminary business plan for the expansion. Show me what you would need. Let's talk again on Friday." After he left, I just stood there for a long time in the silent workshop, the gravity of his offer slowly sinking in. This wasn't just about a job, it was about respect. It was about being seen for my ability, not my name or my gender. The news, as I expected, traveled at the speed of light. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my father. "What did you do?" he roared, his voice cracking with fury. There was no greeting, no preamble. "Richard Peterson just called me. He's pulling the Pinnacle Towers contract. He said he was reevaluating his options. This is your doing." "Hello, Dad," I said calmly, the ice in my own voice surprising me. "I haven't done anything. Mr. Peterson visited my workshop today, that's all." "Your workshop?" he scoffed. "You mean that little garage? You went behind our backs. You deliberately sabotaged this company. You stole our biggest client." My brother's voice suddenly came on the line, evidently on speakerphone. "I knew it. The second you walked out of here, I knew you were going to pull something like this. You are the most vindictive, spiteful person I have ever met, Clara." The accusations, the sheer, unadulterated venom in their voices should have hurt, but they didn't. All I felt was a strange sense of clarity. They couldn't even fathom that this was a consequence of their own actions. In their world, they were the victims. I was the villain. "I didn't steal anyone," I said, my voice level and clear. "I resigned from my job and I started a business. A client, who I have a long professional history with, became aware of this and made a decision based on where he believes he will get the best quality work. It's called capitalism. I thought you both were big fans of it." "This is about family. This is about loyalty," my father yelled. "You want to talk about loyalty?" I shot back, the ice in my voice finally cracking to reveal the fire beneath. "Loyalty is what I gave this family and this company for 10 years. I gave you my time, my talent, and my heart. And in return, you told me my contributions were irrelevant because I wasn't born a man. You told me my place was to work for my less qualified brother. You made a business decision, Dad. You decided that Marcus's birthright was more valuable than my skill. All I have done is make my own business decision in response." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You can't handle this contract, Clara," Marcus finally said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You'll fail, and you'll take Sterling down with you. You're out of your league." "Thank you for your concern, Marcus," I said. "But for the first time in my life, I'm the one who gets to decide what league I'm in. Don't call me again." I ended the call. My hand was trembling slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. The confrontation was ugly, but it was necessary. It severed the final, frayed thread of obligation I felt toward them. I was no longer their daughter, their sister, the loyal employee. I was their competitor, and I was about to go to work. Accepting Mr. Peterson's offer was like stepping through a door into a different reality. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity, a blur of spreadsheets, legal documents, and real estate listings. Armed with Sterling Development's backing, I wasn't just building cabinets anymore. I was building a company. I created a meticulous business plan detailing every phase of the expansion. I leased a 15,000 square foot industrial space, a massive, echoing building that made my old garage look like a dollhouse. Walking through it for the first time, keys in my hand, I felt a thrill that was equal parts terror and excitement. This was real. The first person I called was Louis. I met him for coffee and laid out my vision. I didn't just offer him a job as my head carpenter, I offered him a partnership. A small equity stake in the company. I wanted him to be a builder of the business, not just an employee. Tears welled up in his eyes as he accepted. "To build something real, Clarita," he said. "From the ground up, it is an honor." Word got out quickly. Within a month, 2 of the best craftsmen from Vance and Sons had quietly submitted their resignations and come to work for me. They didn't do it out of spite for my father. They did it for the opportunity to be part of something where craftsmanship was the highest value, where their skills would be respected and nurtured. We filled the new space with the best equipment money could buy, a mirror image of my father's setup, but newer, more advanced. As I walked through my bustling new workshop, hearing the familiar hum of saws and the scent of sawdust, I felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. This was everything I had ever wanted, but I had achieved it entirely on my own terms. The sign that was being fabricated for the front of the building didn't say Vance and Sons. It said Clara Vance Designs. My name. My work, my future. The Pinnacle Towers project was an immense challenge. It demanded perfection at every stage, from the digital renderings to the final installation. There were stressful days and sleepless nights, but the difference was profound. The pressure was mine to manage. The successes were mine to claim. My team was loyal, passionate, and dedicated. We were a real team, bound by mutual respect and a shared love for the craft. About a year into the project, I attended a major national industry trade show. It was a huge event, and Clara Vance Designs had a small but elegant booth showcasing our work for the Pinnacle project. Our booth was getting a lot of attention. Designers and architects were impressed with the innovation and the flawless execution of our pieces. Across the vast convention hall, I saw the Vance & Sons booth. It was larger and flashier than mine, but it felt hollow. Marcus was there, dressed in an expensive suit, glad-handing a potential customer. My father was standing off to the side, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. Their booth displayed the same designs they had been using for years, designs that I had created. There was nothing new, nothing innovative. Our eyes met across the crowded floor. There was a complex mix of emotions on his face: anger, regret, and something that looked like reluctant pride. I gave him a small, neutral nod. It wasn't a gesture of gloating or of forgiveness. It was simply an acknowledgement of the path he had set me on. He had meant for it to be a dead end, but it had turned out to be my runway. I turned back to the architect who was admiring one of my designs, a warm sense of peace settling over me. I hadn't set out to destroy my family's business or to seek revenge. I had only set out to claim my own worth, to build a life where my skills were the only currency that mattered. The fact that my success had inadvertently crippled their company was a consequence of their choices, not a goal of mine. They had lost their biggest client, their best craftsmen, and their creative engine all at once, and they were struggling to recover. My future was not defined by their downfall, but by my own ascent. It was a future I was building with my own two hands, out of wood and steel, and an unbreakable belief in myself. And it was more beautiful and more sturdy than anything I could have inherited. Now I'd like to turn it over to you, the listener. Have you ever been in a situation where your skills were overlooked for reasons that had nothing to do with your ability? When have you had to make the difficult choice to walk away from something familiar in order to build something for yourself? We often find ourselves at crossroads defined by the expectations of others and the truth of our own hearts. The path to self-worth is rarely the easiest one, but as this story shows, it is often the most rewarding. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human, navigating our complex relationships and seeking our own truths. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with someone who might find it resonates with them. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.